Chag Sameach, my friends. So wonderful to be able to join you at this wonderful celebration of our learning, our tradition, and our histories. This beautiful holiday of Shavuot that we're in the midst of, that began just a few hours ago, is one that is perhaps shrouded in a little bit of mystery, or a little bit, maybe dare I say, a little bit of blaseness. Like it's a holiday that, yeah, it's cheesecake and maybe a little bit of giving of the Torah. But if you think, aside from giving of the Torah and cheesecake, what really do we know about Shavuot? Is there any unique rituals that have to do with simply Shavuot? Rosh Hashanah, we blow a shofar. Yom Kippur, we fast and we don't wear leather. On Sukkot, we build beautiful tabernacles, huts. We shake the lulav and the etrog. Pesach, we clean for weeks beforehand, and we hold the seders, we eat matzah. And Shavuot, what is it? Not a lot there. It's sort of this holiday that is floating off in the ether, not really connected to any of the rest of the holidays that we have in our calendar. It's a loner, as it were. But there might be something a little bit more unique about it. Now, if we look at the way it is set up in the Bible, we can see that Shavuot itself is unique. It sits here when we're looking in the book of Leviticus. And it tells us in the Parshat Emor in chapter 23, which says here that it begins to give us the outline of the calendar. It begins to give us all the different cycles of the days. First of all, these are the fixate. Vayedaber Adonai Moshe lemor. That's going to be important, right? God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, these are my fixed times, God's fixed times, that I am, that which shall be proclaimed as sacred occasions." Now, what's the first one? Shabbat. On 6 days, work may be done, but on the seventh day, there will be a Shabbat of complete rest, a sacred occasion. You shall do no work. It shall be a Shabbat of the Lord throughout your settlements. Okay? That is the first one. And notice it follows a pattern. It tells us, Vayedaber Adonai Moshe lemor, God spoke, and then speak to them and tell them on which specific day there is going to be a holiday. Okay? Now, if we look here, on a different way of looking at it, we then have a pay. That means that that's one paragraph. Then there is the next section. Ele moadei Adonai mikra'ei kodesh. These are the holidays, or the set times, I should say, which of the sacred occasions which you shall celebrate. And what's the first one that we have? The first one is not Rosh Hashanah. That's in the 7th month. On the first month, the 14th day of the month, it shall be a Passover, right? On the 15th day of that month, you shall eat unleavened bread. You shall eat also unleavened bread for 7 days. On the first day is Yom Tov, a sacred occasion, and you shall not work. And on the 7th day also is a Yom Tov. And then it goes on to say that you shall give them the harvest, the sheaf, and then you will do all these things. Elevate it, burnt offerings, the meal offering, and all these other things. And then all of a sudden, until that very day, you have brought the offering. And from that day on which you bring the day after the Shabbat, you shall count off 7 weeks. So already curiosity here. What day? What day? The day after the Shabbat. Well, we interpret that to mean the second day of Pesach. But that's not so clear here. You must count it. 50 days. You shall bring from your settlement 2 loaves of bread as an elevation offering, 2/10 of a measure, and so on and so forth. All these different offerings that you're going to bring. The offering of the goat, and you shall elevate these of the grain offering, the sheaf offering, and the lamb offering. And on that same day, Betzem Hayom Hazeh, on that same day, you shall hold a celebration. It will be a sacred occasion for you. You shall do no work at your occupations. Well, okay, but what day and what holiday? Now, we know we're talking about Shavuot now, but interestingly here, it doesn't mention that name at all in any place. Nowhere. And you shall reap. That's the end here of this section of Shavuot. Then, all of a sudden, we go, and that is, look, now here is the end of the paragraph. But Pesach and Shavuot are sort of lumped in together. Then we speak about Rosh Hashanah, which is on the first day of the month. And there is loud blasts. There is Yom Kippur, which by Daber Adonai, again, on a specific day, again. And then it finishes by Daber Adonai Moshe Lemor, again, a new holiday. This one is Sukkot. Tells you B'chamisha Asar Yom Lachodesh Hashvi'i, a specific day it happens. These are the holidays. Okay, so if that indeed is the case, when we look here just a slightly more detailed back to our source sheets, it's talking about Shavuot. Okay, it's talking about Shavuot, and it's saying that it is different. It's unique by the virtue of the way it is organized, by virtue of the way it is brought to our attention here in this book of Leviticus, in Vayikra. It's organized very differently. So right away, just reading these, we have a few questions, or we make note of a few different things. First of all, the section, it separates the holidays, Pesach and Shavuot, and then all the rest of the holidays. Furthermore, there's no spacing, like I said, between Pesach and Shavuot. Shavuot does not have the typical introduction, Vayidaber Adonai Moshe Lemor, and Shavuot also is not explicitly mentioned here, nor by its alternate names, Man Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. Also, and finally, every holiday has a specific date. A specific date, except for Shavuot. We only know what date it starts based on when Pesach is, and specifically from the second Shabbat of Pesach. So we're going to try and tease out an answer, be able to maybe answer at least some of these questions, and to see why that is and how that came to be this holiday that we know of as Shavuot. Okay, so first of all, we have to understand, why is Shavuot there? We know that there's a connection, but why? Right? We know that there seems to be a connection between Pesach and Shavuot. Now, if we look in Sefer HaChinuch, one of the sources that you can tell us that there is this connection, but what is it? So he was saying here, it is from the roots of the commandment, from the angle of the simple understanding that since the entire essence of Israel is only the Torah, and because of the Torah were the heavens and the earth created, and it is the essence and the reason that they were redeemed and left from Egypt, in order that they receive the Torah at Sinai and fulfill it, right? He's saying the whole point of leaving Egypt was the Torah, right? Now, you may have seen the movie Prince of Egypt, okay? Prince of Egypt, and it is the scene where at the end, you may not be aware of this, when they created this movie, the producers made sure to employ and to get advice from biblical scholars, both Christian and Jewish, and all of them said that when you're telling the story of the Exodus, you cannot end it, right? You cannot end it at the crossing of the Red Sea. That is not the end of the story. It may be the end of the celebration of Pesach, but that is not the end of the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Where does it end? And how does the movie end? These biblical professors and scholars insisted that the ending of the story, the ending of the movie, must be with Moses coming down from Sinai. Okay? It must be with Moses coming down from Sinai, because without that last crucial element, the Exodus from Egypt doesn't make sense, as he's saying here. The essence and the reason that they were redeemed and left from Egypt, in order to receive the Torah at Sinai and fulfill it. Okay, so, okay, great. It's there. The two holidays are connected, or at least thematically are connected. But does that mean then what? So God made a sign of their leaving Egypt for the receiving of the Torah, as we always make what is secondary into a sign for what is the essence, right? The essence was receiving the Torah. This secondary sign was the leaving of Egypt. Why does he do that? We were commanded, right? We were commanded to tally from the morrow of the holiday of Pesach until the day of the giving of the Torah, to show about ourselves the great desire we have for the honored day which our hearts yearn for, like a slave seeks shade, and always tallies when will come the yearned time that he goes out to freedom. Okay? This is why it's giving us a structure to give of that yearning that we have to go to that thing of great importance, that great importance of the receiving of the Torah. Now, the tally shows about a man in the counting, and that tallying is the Omer, the counting. Okay, such and such days have passed from the tally. We do not tally. We do not tally it. We're counting from the from leaving of Egypt. By the way, we don't count down towards Shavuot. We count up. Is because all this shows a great desire to reach the time of Shavuot, not to count down towards it. So, if that is the case, then, if so, why do we begin counting from the day after Pesach and not from the first day? Interesting question. You would think that you're counting as soon as Pesach happens, that Exodus from Egypt, we count those days. Why count from the second day, not the first day? If it's so important and it's so intrinsically linked, here he's saying the answer is that it is because the first day is entirely dedicated to the remembering the great miracle, which is the Exodus from Egypt. Okay? The remembering the great miracle, which is the Exodus from Egypt. That is a sign and a proof of the world having been created. We may not mix something else into its joy and mention anything else with it. Much in the same way that we don't want to add sorrow to these things, we also don't want to mix joy. That is the day to remember the Exodus from Egypt. That and only that on that first day. And after that, the second day, then we can start linking it to what happens to Shavuot. So here in the Sefer HaChinuch, the author is clearly subordinating Shavuot to the preceding holiday of Pesach. Okay, and we can see this sometimes in the Talmud. When they mention Shavuot, it is not always called Shavuot. Sometimes it's called Atzeret Shel Pesach, right? Which, where else do we know about a holiday with Atzeret? That's right, Shmini Atzeret. Shmini Atzeret. And what is Shmini Atzeret? It's that 8th day, that extra day that we've appended to Sukkot. Technically speaking, it is not part of Sukkot. It is its own holiday. What do we do uniquely on that holiday? Nothing. There is no specific ritual that we do on Shmini Atzeret. It is a Yom Tov. We don't work. We don't do our jobs. We simply stop on that 8th day. Atzeret meaning a stop, and that's all we do. That's all we do. Stop on that day as the extra day. Some interpretations are it is simply a way for God to enjoy the company of us for one day more, if we would have made that pilgrimage to Jerusalem to make the offerings. But aside from that, there is no other ritual that we have associated with Shmini Atzeret. And so there is also this connection, therefore, that perhaps Shavuot is in a way, an Atzeret, an extra bit appended, or as they write in the Talmud, a crowning glory of Pesach that's appended to Pesach. Okay? Shavuot really doesn't have its own rituals associated with it. I mean, it does now. The rabbis added in the reading of the book of Ruth. But originally and in the Bible, when we are reading up here, when it gives you the things that we're supposed to do for Shavuot, what is it that we do? On that same day, you hold a celebration. It will be a sacred occasion for you. All this other stuff is the things coming up towards it, but it's not on that day. It's not on that day. So Shavuot is, we can see, a holiday not like the others. A holiday not like the others. It is an Atzeret Shel Pesach, as it says in the Talmud, and it gives us this intrinsic link between the two, because it's not a holiday like any other. We can read a little bit here, another biblical source connecting the holiday of Pesach and Shavuot, because remember the story at Mount Sinai. What is Moses told by God? Vayomer ki ehyeh imach. God said, I will be with you. And that will be the sign. Ki anochi shalachticha, that I sent you. Behotziacha et ha'am mitzrayim. And when you have freed the people from Egypt, ta'abdun et Elohim al hahar hazeh. Worship, you will worship. You shall worship God at this mountain. Traditionally, we understand that where Moses had the revelation at Mount Sinai, where Moses had the revelation with God at the burning bush was Mount Sinai. And God had Moses bring them back, the Israelites, back there, not in Egypt, not in the land of Israel, at this place in the middle of nowhere, to have this celebration. But more importantly, and somewhat subtly here, is that it is not about freeing them from slavery. That is not the point. That's the means. What is the end? What is the point? Ta'avdun et Elohim. Serve, worship God. That is the point. Okay? The entire exercise, the entire point of the Exodus is not an end unto itself, the leaving of Egypt, the slavery, but the means of freeing Israel from bondage. Freedom from slavery leads to freedom to choose, to serve, freedom for something. As it says, some various different places in our tradition, the truly free person is the one committed to Torah, the one committed to this way of life, because you freely chose to do so. Okay? So there are these linkages now between the themes of Pesach and Shavuot, and even in the rabbis and the Talmud are saying even more explicitly that there is a more direct linkage because of the name of the holiday, Atzeret Shel Pesach. So, but then if that is the case, Akedat Yitzchak now brings a very interesting question. Right? On that day, regarding the sanctity of the great and holy day, regarding the sanctity of the great and holy day on which the Torah was given, it is merely stated that on that day you shall hold a celebration. It shall be a sacred occasion for you. You shall not work at your occupations. This is direct quoting there. This is the law for all time. Now, the reference is made to the completion of the counting, the offering of the 2 loaves. But why did not the Torah explain that it was on this day that we receive the divine Torah, a theme which is central in our liturgy and customs from time immemorial? That is a very important question. If we're saying, and the rabbis seem to be implying in their commentaries, that there is a linkage between the leaving of Egypt and Shavuot, which is the time of the receiving of the Torah, why is that not mentioned there specifically? Why not? It's a good question. Now, one could answer that the rabbi simply grafted that meaning onto the holiday well after the fact. There may be something to that, but in a slightly more spiritual understanding, there is several different attempts. One of them is by Isaac Arama, and also in the Midrash. We'll look at 2 of these different sources to try and understand what the answer to that question might be. Okay, he writes, the commemoration of the giving of the Torah cannot be limited to a particular time like other matters connected with the festivals. But it is a precept that applies at all hours and at all times, as it is written, let not this book of the teaching cease from your lips, but recite it day and night. This is Joshua. The context here is that Joshua has now taken over. Moses has just passed away. Joshua is now the leader, the spiritual leader of the people. They're about to enter into the conquest of the land. And Joshua is reminding them of the covenant that they've made. Now, they are not at Mount Sinai. They're not even really in the wilderness. They are about to cross the River Jordan. Joshua is reminding them, hey, we have made a pact, or at least you and your ancestors did. I was there. Most of you maybe not, but I was there. And it's still applicable today. And it's not just that one-off moment at Mount Sinai that we made that pact. It is saying that each and every day we are commanded that it should be as fresh and as dear to us as on the day it was given. This is written, the Lord your God commands you this day to observe these laws and rules. Observe them faithfully with all your heart and soul. So there's a few other instances in our tradition where it says on this day, and it does not give us a specific time. One of the most important ones, one of the most famous ones, is chapter 19 of Exodus, where on the 3rd day of the 3rd month from the leaving of Egypt, on that day. Well, what day is that? There's no date given, right? Again, and the rabbis play with that. They understand that to mean, right? They understand that to mean that there is actually an important lesson to be learned from that the giving and the receiving of Matan Torah and all that entails in the covenant is not just simply on that day, that one-off occasion that happened to our ancestors way back when. They are saying, as Isaac Arama is saying, as the Midrash is about to say, each day we are commanded that its context remain as fresh and as dear to us as on the day they were given. So the text, our tradition, is being deliberately vague as to the time, because the time is eternal. It's always, we are always to be receiving that. And it should be near and dear and fresh each and every day. Now, the Midrash Tanchuma explores this question and gives a very, very similar answer, right? What is the meaning of this day? Had the Holy One, blessed be He, not given a command to Israel until now? And was not this the 40th year since they left Egypt, as it stated? And it came to pass in the 40th year. Then what is the meaning of the words this day? Meaning we should know, or why are they being so vague about what day it is? Simply that Moses spoke to Israel as follows. And this is the Midrash filling in the blanks of what was really being said there. On each and every day, let the Torah be dear to you as if you had received it this day from Sinai. Now, there's another explanation also of trying to understand why this vagueness was happening around the giving and the receiving of Matan Torah. And the idea here is, and I love this quote from Paul Tillich. He's a Christian theologian, and trying to understand what exactly it is that happened at Mount Sinai. And he writes, it's the explosion of the infinite into the realm of the finite. And so there's could be in the text a lot of vagueness, a lot of uncertainty as to what exactly is happening. But it's also for us to try and make sure that we keep this near and dear to our hearts, that we keep this a constant reminder of renewing that covenant that is given to our ancestors, and we make it fresh and we make it new. So the Midrash and Isaac Arama are making this connection that it doesn't necessarily need to link Shavuot as that specific day, because there is no specific day for Matan Torah, for the giving of the Torah, because it should be each and every single day. So that is why they answer that the Torah does not give a specific day for Shavuot, and more importantly, does not give a specific reason that Shavuot is the time for giving of the Torah. Hoffman, further, is a much more modern commentator, but Hoffman, on his commentary of Leviticus, states, no symbolic ritual was instituted, and he's trying to answer the question. Now, the final question that I asked, there's no rituals that are associated with Shavuot. There's nothing that has its own unique thing to Shavuot, except for the reading of Ruth, which is much, much, much later. Nothing in the Bible. No blowing of the shofar, no fasting, no building anything, no shaking anything. So why not? No symbolic ritual was instituted for Shavuot to mark the Sinaitic revelation, for the reason that it cannot be translated into the tangible language of symbol. Right? This is that idea that Paul Tillich is talking about, the infinite exploding into the finite. That experience of God, that covenant, it's an intangible, and to try and limit it to a symbol is futile and would do a disservice. The children of Israel had been commanded to take heed that you saw no likeness on the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb from the midst of the fire, so as not to become involved in any idolatrous anthropomorphic conception of the divinity. Remember, we did do that, and it did not end well for us, the golden calf. They were simply bidden to commemorate the historic experience. They would celebrate on the day of the giving of the law the conclusion of the harvest as well, to give thanks to God on bringing their first fruits to the sanctuary, and acknowledge that God is the Lord of all to whom it was meant to pay homage and whose commandments they were to obey. This is referencing the offering of the first fruits, which is given later on in the Bible, that you are a farmer, you bring this first fruits to the temple or to the Mishkan or to the Kohen, wherever the case may be, when you're living in the land of Israel, when we finally make it there. And the declaration that they make, right, is, and we take some of that and we use that in the Haggadah, that Arami Oved Avi, my father was a wandering Aramean, and so on and so forth. We went down to Egypt and we multiplied, we had great numbers, and yada, yada, yada. All this stuff happening. What's missing here is any reference whatsoever to the fruit that you're about to offer. No reference whatsoever. None at all. What is there is this concept, this idea that you are making an offering and you're connecting yourself to the history and the story of who we are, but also that amazing experience that happened at Mount Sinai. By this, they would reenact the promise that they made at Mount Sinai. We will do, and then we will understand, right? And this is that beautiful concept that we have, that it is not for us to try and the living of our tradition is something that must be experienced. It must be done for it to make sense. You can't begin to try and deconstruct it without having experienced it, because the experience of Shabbat is much different than the study of Shabbat. The living of a life that is full of holiness and content is unique and must be lived to be experienced and to be understood. I liken this sometimes to the way relationship develops. You don't start off on the first day you meet somebody deciding that you're going to love them. You have to spend time with them. You have to engage with them. You have to go out on dates, buy flowers, hold hands, whatever the case may be. And at some point, you're going to realize that you love this person. You will do the things, and then you will experience the thing, is what that beautiful concept is talking about. So just to begin to wrap this up briefly, to summarize, we know that Pesach and Shavuot are connected. We know that they both commemorate a natural phenomenon. The Pesach is the beginning of the harvest, and Shavuot is the end of the harvest and the offering of these first fruits. But we must understand it is much, much more than that. Pesach is this wonderful beginning of the story, that beginning of the Exodus. Shavuot is that linkage, that bookend that ends that arc of that story, right? It's like many of these beautiful or these amazing movies that are coming out that are multiple stories, trilogies or whatnot. They can stand alone, but the story is so much more complete when you have the full arc of the story there to behold. It's marking much more than a natural phenomenon. It really is a milestone in our spiritual history. It's a move from slavery to service of God. And if you simply are looking at it from a harvest perspective, that's a very transitory material celebration. That is not, there's much, much more to it than that. When you include Shavuot to Pesach and you link it, in many ways, I think part of one story, one holiday, it makes it a spiritual and eternal message. So when we are having this celebration tonight, I want us to try and remember and continue and link ourselves with the holiday that was 7 weeks ago, the holiday of Pesach. And yes, it's a bit different this year because we are doing this like this over Zoom. We did our Seders over Zoom, but it still is a concept that elevates us. It links that holiday into a time when we know that there is a greater means of our expressing and elevating ourselves, the essence of who we are and the essence of who we must become. I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful Chag Sameach. It's been a joy and a pleasure learning with you. Chag Sameach.